So I know it might not seem like it or feel like it, but Matt Gaetz' very short-lived ride as the pick for Attorney General actually did teach us some very important lessons. I mean, for starters, it reminded us that the vetting process for cabinet members is kind of important. And that probably shouldn't be breaking news to anyone. I mean, given it's a process that presidential transitions of both parties have engaged in for decades. I mean, for anyone who has been through it before, it can feel a bit like an invasive exam. Call it a colonoscopy, call it a root canal, call it whatever you want to call it. But my point is that it's just not exactly pleasant. I mean, typically, the transition team asks you everything about your background. They ask about your clients, your financial records, your personal life, and you're put through an FBI background check, which often involves the FBI even calling your friends and family and asking them even more questions. Then you go through hours of interviews about what they find with a team of lawyers. That's just some of what typically happens before you were even offered one of these top jobs that require Senate confirmation. And that makes sense because they are some of the most important jobs in our government. Now, of course, as we now know, and maybe you're not surprised by, Donald Trump is taking a bit of a different approach. And as we saw this week, that can come with certain consequences. There are consequences for Trump himself if his picks don't get confirmed. For Senate Republicans who can be put in an awkward spot as things pop out in the press they weren't aware of. And more importantly, for the American people, if a number of these picks manage to get through, people we know very little about. I mean, consider the new details about Gaetz that were unearthed this week, like this document obtained by the New York Times showing a web of payments Gaetz made, including thousands of dollars to two women who testified that he hired them for sex. Gaetz continues to deny the allegations, but that steady drip of highly damaging information forced him to drop his bid after just 8 crazy days. And then there's Pete Hegseth and the police records that were released this week detailing an allegation of sexual assault from 2017. Now, Hegseth was never charged and denies any wrongdoing, but this report paints a pretty vivid and pretty horrifying scene where a woman remembers saying no a lot, as Hegseth took her phone, physically blocked her from leaving a hotel room, and sexually assaulted her. She later went to the hospital and also underwent a rape kit exam. Trump's transition team was reportedly completely blindsided by these new details. But again, one surefire way to not be blindsided by things like that is to put your nominees through an actual vetting process. And then there's Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, this week, CNN reported that she was briefly placed on a government watch list that prompts additional security screening before flights after her overseas travel patterns and foreign connections triggered a government algorithm earlier this year. And that comes as questions continue to swirl about her secret meeting in 2017 with Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad and about her pro-Russia, pro-Putin rhetoric. And now, surprise, surprise, Republican senators want access to her FBI file to see if there's more unknown information about her, including possible other foreign contacts. Again, the person I just described is Donald Trump's pick for the Director of National Intelligence of the United States of America. Now, trust me, these are all things that would have come up in a typical vetting process. These are all questions that would have been asked and answered to some degree. And look, let's be honest, maybe Donald Trump would have moved forward with all these nominees regardless. We don't know that. But these are all things that the Senate, and most importantly, the public, deserve to know about the people who are going to serve in incredibly important, high-ranking government roles. And really, the only reason we know any of it right now is because of the press. Trump is clearly not going to do his due diligence. He's not going to ask the questions. He's not going to require the vetting or the FBI background checks. So if he won't do those things, journalists have to. I mean, without a free press, we wouldn't know about Gaetz's Venmo payments, Hegseth's police report, or Gabbard's time on a government watch list. Because of the free press, we learned a whole lot about these people that we didn't know even 1 week ago. But here's the important part. There is still a lot that we don't know. And that is kind of the other takeaway for me from this week. Matt Gaetz dropping out does not mean Trump's next choice for attorney general deserves less scrutiny. It does not mean Pete Hegseth or Tulsi Gabbard deserve less scrutiny. It doesn't mean anyone should stop the questions, stop the digging, stop the pressure. It actually means the opposite, because the stakes are so high and there's still so much we don't know about these other cabinet choices. So we need to keep asking the questions. And that goes for reporters, members of Congress, their staff, citizens, all of you sitting at home. And here's a good place to start. Just hours after Gaetz dropped out, Trump announced his new pick for attorney general, Pam Bondi. Well, no, she's not Matt Gaetz. There's only one of that guy. There's still a lot of questions everyone should be asking about her, too. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin. He's the ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. So let me start there, because we've seen this cycle of things happen quite a bit in the past, although this is like an extreme version of it. Pam Bondi is the new nominee to be Attorney General. What should people be asking about her?
Well, one of the functions of doing the background security clearances in the regular vetting process is that the basic facts can be out there, and then we can focus on somebody's ideas and what they've actually done. And so in some sense, all of this scandal serves them pretty well. I mean, if you think about the case of Hegseth, well, we're focused on the alleged sexual assault that took place with this woman. We're not focused on the fact that he says women should not be allowed in a combat
And we
roles
should be, absolutely.
It's part of a whole gender ideology he has. Now, Bondi, again, we're just piecing together the details now, but she's somebody who's been a very loyal Trump partisan, including on election denialism. So she's gone on TV to echo election denialist claims. She has made false allegations about cheating in the 2020 presidential election, which still they adhere to, even though, we have 60 federal and state court decisions rejecting all of their fraudulent claims. And she has played that role for Trump all along. So she's a very loyal partisan. So in her case, I think we've got to be focused on what are they going to do with the Department of Justice? Are they going to convert this institution, which has been an implementer of law enforcement and has improved dramatically over time, into the president's personal law firm and an instrument of vendetta and retribution?
This is such an important point, and I've talked a lot about the qualifications piece, too. I'm so glad you raised that, because the Washington Post is reporting that Donald Trump plans to fire the entire team that worked with Jack Smith, perhaps not a surprise, in the 2 federal cases against him, and they've also said they're going to resign, including career attorneys typically protected from political retribution, all of them. He also plans to redirect DOJ resources to investigate the 2020 election. Pam Bondi is somebody who would be leading the Department of Justice. I'm sure you're horrified by that. I'd love to get your reaction. But I also wanted to ask you, people feel very powerless out there. What can Democrats do if that's where Donald Trump wants to move the resources of the Department of Justice? Is there anything that Democrats can do?
Well, look, the Trump was not elected with any kind of positive agenda for the country. I mean, his most detailed agenda was around immigration and deportation. They are already starting to try to alter laws around the country to build in a political advantage, like in North Carolina, where the Democrats swept a lot of the state constitutional offices. The outgoing Republican state legislature is trying to entrench Republican power, taking powers away from the governor and giving them to the state auditor. And I view what I think we're about to see at the Department of Justice in exactly the same light. They want to go back to all of the lies about 2020, which have been debunked ad nauseum. They want to install people who are going to prosecute the prosecutors, as Bondi has said. And it looks like a completely different kind of institution from the one that has been built up through both Democratic and Republican administrations in the past. So it looks to me like a recipe for nonstop political warfare. I mean, I liken the time I think we're in very much to like 1798 with the Alien and Sedition Acts, where the only program was anti-immigrant hysteria and then prosecution of political enemies and attacks on the other party and attempts to entrench the majority party. That didn't work out so well for the Federalists. And Thomas Jefferson really led the opposition there. And he said to people, a little patience and we'll see the reign of witches pass over and their spells dissolve and the people recovering their true sight restore their government to its true principles. So he urged people to have patience, but also to be strong and to persevere through a period like this.